led through the mist by the milk light of moon.
Over the Garden Wall is an animated television miniseries created by Patrick McHale. The series consists of 10 episodes, each with a runtime of around 11 minutes, making it a short and easily bingeable experience. Consume at your own discretion. The story follows two half-brothers, Wirt and Greg, who find themselves lost in a mysterious, fantastical forest known as the Unknown. As they journey through this otherworldly landscape, they encounter strange creatures, bizarre characters, and face various challenges in their quest to find their way home. So without further ado, let's jump right into the first episode. The first episode is called The Old Grist Mill. It opens with a frog playing piano, a blue-dressed girl with her dog, a shot of a cat riding an ostrich cart through a pumpkin field, a scene of a circus with a gorilla juggling balls, some action figures, an unknown character looking at a painting of a beautiful woman, a woman stitching, two brothers playing with a mechanical boat, and a few other seemingly random scenes. However, each one of these scenes gives us an insight into what is about to happen in the show, so keep an eye out for what's to come. The show kicks off with the narrator telling us about the unknown, a place where long-forgotten stories are revealed. In the forest, two brothers, Wirt and Greg, find themselves lost, with Greg more concerned about naming a frog than their predicament. Immediately, one might question their attire, but you will have to wait till the very end to find out why they are dressed like idiots. Meanwhile, Wirt, realizing their situation, starts crafting a poem, only to be interrupted by the sound of chopping wood. Following the sound, they encounter a woodsman using a lantern for light. Wirt hesitates to ask for help, and when the man departs, a talking bluebird offers assistance. Wirt, shocked by the talking bird, dismisses it, causing tension between the brothers. Later, the woodsman returns, warning them about the beast and revealing they're in a place called the Unknown, more lost than they realize. The woodsman leads them to his repurposed meal, explaining his job of collecting edelwood trees to fuel his lantern. Wirt contemplates escape but is uncertain about where to go from here. Greg, oblivious to the danger they might be in, plays with the man's belongings. Wirt discusses the woodsman and the beast, and Greg inattentively agrees with everything. Later, Greg loses his frog, and in his search, he discovers the woodsman turning edelwood into oil. Moving on, he encounters a dog-like monster, thinking it is the same beast the old man mentioned. Wirt, who was inside this whole time, hears a commotion and finds Greg in distress. The woodsman, hearing the chaos, panics, questioning the boys about the beast. As the creature attacks, Greg tries to knock out the woodsman, inadvertently causing chaos. Wirt shields himself from the monster, and Greg, with a candy distraction, helps them escape to the roof. Eventually, the boys realize the monster is after Greg's candy trail that he had left as a way out of this place if needed. Learning this, Greg throws the last candy off the roof, leading the monster to its demise in the meal wheel. The boys jump into the lake, the woodsman mourns his ruined meal, and Wirt scolds Greg for the mess. The woodsman then reveals that this beast was merely a dog, and the real threat is still out there. He then instructs the boys to leave the woods, advising Greg to name and care for his frog. The episode ends with the boys walking off to the woods while discussing the name of their new pet frog. One thing that you might have noticed is that the dog in this episode is the same dog we saw in the starting scenes of the show, which leaves us with a question: who is that blue-dressed girl alongside the dog? The next episode, Hard Times at the Huskin Bee, begins with the scenes of nature and animals. Meanwhile, Wirt and Greg walk through the forest, with Greg annoying Wirt by blowing raspberries. They hear a voice and discover Beatrice, the same talking bluebird from the previous episode, stuck in a bush. Greg helps her, and Beatrice promises him a favor for saving her life. Beatrice tells them about Adelaide of the pasture, who can grant wishes, meaning that they can get back home through her, but Wirt opts to explore the nearby town of Pottsfield. In Pottsfield, the seemingly abandoned town, they encounter pumpkin-headed residents celebrating a harvest. The group is accused of trespassing, and Enoch, the town's tallest inhabitant, sentences them to manual labor. They harvest corn and pumpkins, and in a twist, are asked to dig holes. While Wirt worries they might be digging their own graves, Greg uncovers a skeleton, causing panic among the group. Soon after, the entire pumpkin town gathers around. While trying to stall their burial, Wirt discovers the skeletons are part of the celebration, dancing in pumpkin masks. Enoch declares the harvest a success and tells Wirt he is free, but ominously says, "You'll join us one day." Beatrice, Greg, and Wirt regroup and they continue their journey into the unknown. The closing scene features a leaf stuck on a fence while distant laughter reveals the presence of the beast. Now, one thing that we know about this episode is that it features the same ostriches and pumpkins that we saw in the starting scenes, leaving us with the intrigue of the identity of this black cat riding the cart. In Schooltown Follies, and this is one of the more bizarre episodes of the show, Greg, Wirt, and Beatrice are strolling along a path. Greg, ever the lively character, sings about visiting Adelaide's house, much to Wirt's chagrin. Beatrice complains that Wirt is slowing them down, describing him as a pushover. Greg, in search of fun, goes off alone and discovers a small schoolhouse, but avoids it as he wants nothing to do with school. Kids, am I right? Later, Wirt and Beatrice end up at the same schoolhouse and they meet Miss Langtree, the teacher, who instructs them to sit. Wirt, playfully irritating Beatrice, follows orders, emphasizing his supposed pushover nature. Miss Langtree, reminiscing about her fiancé, Jimmy Brown, sings Langtree's lament, reflecting on lost love and teaching the alphabet. Outside, Greg befriends animals playing a game of Two Old Cat. The fun takes a turn when a gorilla scares them, leading to a hideout on the school bell. The bell rings, signaling the start of mealtime, and the students come outside to see a gorilla scaring everyone. He is knocked out by the possum, who hits the gorilla in the head with a stick. Meanwhile, Greg, noticing the students' sadness over bland potatoes, plans to make them tastier. He initiates a lively performance of potatoes and molasses, featuring Greg disturbing molasses to enhance the meal. The musical interlude brings joy until Mr. Langtree, the principal of the school, intervenes, confiscating instruments and ordering bedtime. Feeling he failed to change the world, Greg is disheartened. Wirt, however, admits he may persist in his pushover act. Undeterred, Greg, Wirt, and Beatrice sneak out, finding Mr. Langtree regretting his investment in an animal school. Greg suggests stealing the instruments to save the school, and the next morning, Mr. Langtree finds the instruments missing, but soon witnesses the animals using them for a fundraising concert. The gorilla reappears, revealing himself as Jimmy Brown, Miss Langtree's lost love. You see, he had joined a circus to raise money for his wedding ring, but due to him getting stuck in the costume, everyone thought of him as a real gorilla and would run away at his sight. The joyful reunion concludes with a reprise of potatoes and molasses. Beatrice suggests letting Greg enjoy the moment, while Wirt is reminded to tie his shoe. The chapter highlights themes of friendship, fun, and the power of music in overcoming challenges in the mysterious world of Over the Garden Wall. Also, the gorilla juggling balls in the starting scenes of the show is revealed to be Jimmy Brown, solving yet another mystery of the show. The next episode, titled Songs of the Dark Lantern, begins with Wirt, Gregory, and Beatrice thrown off a speeding hay wagon while seeking directions to Adelaide pasture. In a tavern, after Beatrice is kicked out due to the superstition of bad luck, they encounter various narrative archetypes, including the butcher, baker, midwife, the master and his apprentice, the unhappy tailor, and the tavern keeper, each with unique quirks. When they ask Wirt who he is, his reluctance to accept labels leads to misunderstandings. Outside, Beatrice is accompanied by a horse and hears a mysterious voice chopping wood in the rain. Inside, Wirt seeks directions from the toy maker, who mistakes him for the young lover, offering romantic advice through a song. Beatrice, realizing Wirt is struggling to get directions, flies off to find the woodsman. Back inside, the crowd demands Wirt sing his love song, and he shares their encounters in the unknown, including warnings from the woodsman about the beast. The tavern keeper reveals the beast's dark intentions, turning lost children into oil for his lantern. Mistakenly, she suggests the woodsman may be the beast, shocking the crowd. Just then, Beatrice screams outside, and the tavern keeper urges Wirt to save his friend. Wirt, Greg, and Beatrice rush out, finding the woodsman by an edelwood tree, and Beatrice unconscious. Believing the woodsman is the beast, Wirt kicks the lantern, igniting the tree. They escape on the horse Beatrice met earlier, leaving the woodsman behind. Beatrice awakens and chastises Wirt for not getting directions. Wirt reveals Fred, the talking horse, gave them directions to Adelaide's pasture. making her annoyed as he never said a word to her when she was in the stables. Meanwhile, as the woodsman recovers, a shadowy figure arrives who is identified as the Beast. The Beast reveals the woodsman's burden, which is that he must keep the lantern lit so that his daughter may live on in the flame. The Beast inquires about the children's direction, but the woodsman refuses, emphasizing their safety. The Beast, singing a haunting tune, retreats into the woods, leaving the woodsman determined to protect the lantern. This ending scene reveals not only the woodsman's true intentions, but also introduces us to the toy maker, whose action figures we saw in those starting scenes of the show. The next episode is titled Mad Love. The episode begins with Wirt, Greg, Beatrice, and Fred the horse posing as Quincy Endicott's nephews to obtain 2 pennies for the ferry to Adelaide's pasture. Endicott, a wealthy and emotionally disturbed tea company owner, admits he dislikes his own tea and feels lost in his ever-expanding mansion, claiming he always finds new parts of the mansion every time he explores. He also shares his obsession with a ghostly painting he discovered, which is the same painting we saw in the starting scene of the show. Greg convinces Endicott to show him the painting in a mysterious part of the mansion, and while Endicott and Greg explore, Beatrice and Wirt search for the spare change, leading to revelations in a symbolic armoire. Beatrice reveals she was a human cursed after throwing a rock at a bluebird, and Wirt admits his failure to confess to his crush in secret poetry whispers. They exit the closet through a secret panel, discovering a new part of the mansion. In a hidden part of the mansion, Wirt realizes the architectural inconsistency and speculates about the ghost Endicott mentioned. Meanwhile, Endicott fears losing his mind, and Greg remains hopeful about encountering a ghost. They reach a greenhouse where a white peacock startles Endicott. Greg encourages him to face his fears, leading to an unsettling discovery in the bedroom where he initially found the painting. When the woman in the painting appears in real, he hides behind the bed, thinking she is a ghost. A revelation unfolds that the woman is Margaret Gray, Endicott's tea business rival. Their mansions are interconnected, which explains the ever-expanding mansion and the ghost Endicott saw. Afterward, Endicott and Gray, once enemies, declare their love for each other, and their rivalry comes to a close. In gratitude, Endicott gives Greg and Wirt 2 pennies for the ferry. Fred takes an honest job with Endicott, and the episode concludes with Greg angrily tossing both pennies into a pool, proclaiming that Endicott misunderstood him, revealing a humorous twist to the tale. The next episode is titled Lullaby in Frogland. And despite not having 2 pennies for the ferry, we see that the trio has boarded it, which might be a little troublesome. The ferry is mostly filled with frogs dressed in fancy clothes, and there's even a frog band playing music. The 3 of them are the only ones who aren't frogs on the boat. Wirt and Greg are on their way to Adelaide's house, thinking they'll be home soon, but Beatrice seems sad for some reason. The trouble starts when guards chase Wirt and Greg because they didn't pay for the tickets because Greg threw away all their money in a fountain. To escape capture, Wirt has to play a musical instrument to replace a frog who fell off the boat. While Wirt plays, Greg's frog surprises everyone by singing a song called Over the Garden Wall. The crowd cheers for the group and they are allowed to stay on board. After the boat docks, the frogs get ready to sleep in the mud. Beatrice tries to talk Wirt and Greg into giving up on going to Adelaide. She's grown attached to them and doesn't want any harm coming their way. However, when they are asleep, Beatrice decides to fly ahead secretly to meet Adelaide, but Wirt and Greg follow her without her knowing. When Beatrice reaches Adelaide's house, things aren't what they expected. Adelaide turns out to be a mean old woman, not the kind lady they thought she'd be. Beatrice realizes she was tricked by Adelaide. You see, she has a magic scissor that can turn her family back to human, and Beatrice thought giving the boys in for a few days of labor would do the trick. However, Adelaide, who was working for the Beast, wanted to enslave them for eternity, which is something Beatrice wasn't okay with. Wirt and Greg go inside Adelaide's house and see her and Beatrice talking. Beatrice tries to explain, but Wirt doesn't listen. Adelaide mentions being controlled by the Beast's voice and ensnares the boys, making them think she lured them into a trap. To rescue the boys, Beatrice opens the window, exposing Adelaide to the night air, and she turns to dust. After defeating Adelaide, Wirt and Greg leave the house, with Beatrice feeling sorry for her deal with Adelaide. Wirt is upset and feels he shouldn't have trusted anyone. As they walk back into the woods, Greg's frog, left behind earlier, finds them. Greg is happy to see him, but Wirt is distant and tells Greg to hurry. The episode ends with the three of them continuing their journey through the mysterious woods, while Beatrice is left to ponder on her choices. The next episode is the ringing of the bell. Wirt and Greg are walking in the rain, feeling betrayed by Beatrice's tricks. Greg wonders if Wirt has a plan to go home, and Wirt says he does, but Greg can choose not to follow. The woodsman appears, warning of the beast, but the brothers think he is the beast, and run away. Afterward, the beast tells the woodsman they need to talk. Meanwhile, the boys find an apparently empty house and enter, discovering a girl named Lorna. She warns them about Auntie Whispers, her guardian, claiming she is a bad person. Auntie Whispers arrives and senses someone else in the house while the boys are hiding in a turtle basket. With a magical bell, she questions Lorna but believes there are only turtles in a basket. Afterward, Auntie Whispers commands Lorna to clean the house. Wirt and Greg come out and help Lorna wash the floors quickly, hoping they can all escape Auntie Whispers' wrath. When Auntie Whispers wakes up, they decide to hide again but are found. She warns them to stay away from Lorna, but they believe she is saying it only because she wants to enslave her. Meanwhile, in a closet, they witness Lorna transforming into a demonic figure, revealing she is the one eating people. Realizing the real threat, Wirt and Greg escape through a window and end up in a swamp. As Lorna chases them, Greg's frog, which swallowed Auntie Whisper's bell, starts to glow. Using the bell inside the frog, Wirt commands the spirit to leave Lorna's body and it obeys. Auntie Whispers is happy that Lorna is no longer possessed, but also sad that she won't need her anymore. However, Lorna, a seemingly sweet and ordinary girl, decides to stay with Auntie Whispers as she is her only family. As Wirt and Greg leave, Auntie Whispers warns them about her sister Adelaide, saying she can't be trusted. Wow, you don't say. The brothers continue walking, and Wirt doubts if they'll ever find their home. Greg encourages Wirt, and the beast watches them from afar, claiming there is only one way, and that's his way. The next episode, Babes in the Wood. In this chapter, Greg, Wirt, and Greg's frog traverse a lake using an outhouse as a makeshift boat. They hear the haunting song of the beast, which deeply affects Wirt. When they reach land, Wirt expresses his despair about never finding their way home and scolds Greg for his childish behavior. The trio rests under a tree, and Wirt and Greg eventually fall asleep. In Greg's dream, he visits Cloud City, where he is welcomed by the residents. They invite him to lead a song to teach him leadership. However, the song inadvertently releases the North Wind and its minions. Greg engages in a fight with the North Wind inside a house, eventually trapping it in a bottle. The Queen of the Clouds thanks Greg for saving the city and offers him a way to go home. When he asks for his brother to tag along, she informs him that they cannot grant his wish because Wirt is claimed by the beast. To save his brother, Greg selflessly wishes for the beast to take him instead. Wirt wakes up to Greg bidding him farewell and advising him to take care of his frog. Greg then willingly walks away with the beast and fades away from sight. When Wirt realizes what happened, he frantically chases after them. While running, Wirt slips on a hidden frozen lake, falling through the ice. Fortunately, Beatrice and the fisher fish rescue Wirt using a fishing net, and he loses consciousness. Well, one thing that I can make from this episode was that the beast was only able to claim Wirt when he had lost all hope of ever returning home. This tells us that the beast feeds off of negative emotions and claims the lives of those who have no hope left. In the next episode, Into the Unknown, which brings us to a flashback of Wirt before he went to the unknown. The chapter begins with Wirt feeling distressed in his room, tossing a cassette labeled "For Sarah" against the wall in frustration. He decides to create a makeshift Halloween costume using an old marching band uniform from the attic. As he leaves his house, he utters Into the Unknown. On the way to the football field, Wirt encounters his brother Greg, who proudly shows off candy earned from Mrs. Daniels. Greg, sporting a tea kettle as an elephant trunk, notices Wirt's cassette and offers to deliver it to Sarah, the town's mascot. Greg runs into Wirt's classmates, leading to misconceptions about the cassette being a romantic gesture for Sarah, a girl Wirt likes. Wirt, desperate to reclaim the tape, follows Greg to a Halloween party. As Sarah leaves for a graveyard gathering, Wirt tries to retrieve the tape from her jacket but faces challenges. Despite not being invited, Wirt and Greg sneak into the party, and Sarah invites Wirt to join them in the graveyard, but he declines, feeling rejected. As Wirt watches Sarah and Jason Funderburker, a guy who is also into Sarah, a police car disrupts the gathering. Panicking, Wirt and Greg flee over the garden wall, falling into a lake. The scene shifts back to the unknown, where Wirt is saved by Beatrice's family. Wirt, determined to find Greg, leaves the tree despite the impending snowstorm. Beatrice's mother advises him to wait, but Wirt insists on searching for his brother and Beatrice, walking into the storm with the frog. The chapter encapsulates Wirt's emotional turmoil, unrequited feelings for Sarah, and the unexpected journey into the unknown with Greg and Beatrice. The unknown becomes a metaphorical and literal space for self-discovery and the pursuit of lost connections. Additionally, since both Greg and Wirt fell into the lake and were unconscious, I think the unknown represents the place between life and death, a conjoined space where people have to find their way out. Falling means dying forever, and being able to escape means waking up in the real world. The next episode, The Unknown, which is the 10th and the final episode of the show, starts with Beatrice on a quest to find Greg in the mysterious unknown. While searching, she finds Greg talking to the strange beast. The beast gives Greg tough tasks, but Greg, using his creativity, manages to complete them. Beatrice tries to call out to Greg, but the beast distracts him. The beast then gives Greg a nearly impossible task, catching the sun and putting it in a teacup. Greg cleverly puts the cup on a stump, promising the sun will go into it when it sets. The beast tells Greg to wait in the cold, and though shivering, Greg stays determined. Meanwhile, Wirt joins Beatrice in the search, and the two are racing against time as Greg is losing his life slowly by the second. Meanwhile, the woodsman, dealing with his past mistakes, finds edelwood branches resistant to turning into oil. He hears the beast's song and confronts it, discovering Greg trapped in an edelwood tree. The beast wants Greg for the lantern, but the woodsman refuses to harm him. A showdown happens as the beast taunts the woodsman about his daughter. The woodsman resists. Wirt and Beatrice find Greg, and Greg asks Wirt to tell Mrs. Daniels about his stolen rock facts rock. This is the rock he keeps pulling out as a joke to state false facts. Meanwhile, the beast, losing patience, offers Wirt a deal: Greg's soul for Wirt's commitment to grind edelwood trees. Wirt hesitates, realizing the absurdity, and contemplates blowing out the lantern. The beast strikes back, enveloping Wirt in darkness. Defying the beast, Wirt gives the lantern to the woodsman and frees Greg. He also gives Beatrice scissors to restore her family. Wirt leaves, and the woodsman, rejecting the beast, faces a choice. Tearfully, he turns the lantern toward the beast, vanquishing it. Wirt wakes up in the pond where they fell on Halloween. He saves Greg and the frog, and friends rush them to the hospital. Greg tells the unknown adventures, and despite doubts, the frog has Auntie Whisper's bell inside his body, meaning that the unknown was in fact a real place. The story ends with the unknown's inhabitants finding joy. The woodsman reunites with his daughter, Beatrice becomes human again, and we learn that she is the same girl we saw in the first scene of the show. Also, the meal from the first episode is shown to be home of Beatrice's family. Some scenes from earlier episodes provide closure to the various storylines. The final shot shows Greg putting his rock facts rock back in Mrs. Daniels' garden, concluding the journey through the unknown, a realm of self-discovery, sacrifice, and hope shaping destinies. Over the Garden Wall is a cool animated show that mixes fantasy, adventure, and mystery. What makes it stand out is its unique old-school art style that gives it a charming and different look compared to regular cartoons. The attention to detail in how things look and the backgrounds add to the magical and sometimes spooky feel of the story. The storytelling in Over the Garden Wall is a good mix of fun and a little bit seriousness. Each episode tells its own little story, but there's an overall plot that connects everything. The show uses fairy tale stuff and folklore to create a world full of weird creatures, mysterious characters, and a feeling of awe. The main characters, Wirt and Greg, are well done. Wirt is more serious and Greg is more fun and energetic. They feel like real brothers, and other characters like the woodsman and Beatrice add more layers to the story. The music in Over the Garden Wall is great too. The songs made by the Blasting Company make the show even more emotional and match the way it looks. The folk-inspired tunes also give the show a timeless and nostalgic vibe. In simple words, Over the Garden Wall is a fantastic animated show for everyone. It mixes art, storytelling, and music in a way that makes it really stand out. So if you're up for an adventure in the strange world of the unknown, this show is a must-watch.
Led through the mist by the milk light of moon.